Hello everyone, this is Andy Rickley, Superintendent of Papillon La Vista Community Schools. Thank you for watching our presentation today on the proposed 2023 bond initiative. This is an initiative that is very important to the district, our school district, and our community, and we are delighted you're taking a moment to watch with us. So, as we proceed, we're going to talk a little bit about the bond projects, the different schools that will be impacted, and finally, the impact on the district tax rate and finances. Over the course of the next several slides, we're going to be talking not only about the bond and the project list that is included in the bond, but we're also going to talk about the particular nuances of a mail-in election, the first time that the district has ever done this type of special election. As we discussed with the community the first semester as we were doing our informational campaign, there are still three focus areas that we want to discuss with our staff and our community. The first focus area is safety and security, which we know is critical in this increasing age where parents and staff members and our community demand the absolute safest environment for our schools. The second priority is making sure that all of our district facilities meet the same standard of greatness that people know and expect when they walk into a Papillon La Vista Community Schools building. And finally, we know that there are segments of the district that are continuing to grow at a very fast rate, particularly at the elementary level, and we want to have projects in place to support that continued growth. First, a little bit about safety and security. We know that school violence is unfortunately a part of the world that we live in. We want to do everything we can as a school district to make sure that our students and our staff are kept as safe as possible. There's a number of factors that we're looking at to make sure that this goal becomes a reality. One, we want to make sure that the door access control systems are as updated and as current as possible. We also want to have interior intercom and paging systems so that in the event of the emergency, staff can communicate with parents, other staff members, and our students. We also want to make sure that exterior fencing is in place around all of our buildings, particularly the elementaries, to keep students from running as well as to keep people from entering without authorization. We've also talked about security film and other bullet-resistant measures. We know that with school violence being what it is in this country, that whatever we can do to slow down people from entering our building, whether they are armed or unarmed, will help save lives. And finally, we have 5 elementary buildings that haven't yet completed their controlled access entryway, and we want to make sure those projects get completed under this proposed bond. So a bit more detail about the elementary projects that we have discussed. We have 4 buildings in particular, 3 of which are listed on this slide, that are older and have smaller classrooms, and we want to make sure that those older buildings get brought up to that design standard that we know and expect in all of our buildings. One, we want to expand some of those smaller classrooms. We know that in 3 of our buildings that the classroom sizes range around 600 square feet. Our newer buildings, such as Ashbury Elementary, have classroom sizes in excess of 800 square feet. Again, we want to make sure that regardless of the age of the building, we have a standard excellence criterion that we're using as we design and build these areas. We also want to do interior renovations, which would include things like fresh carpeting, flooring, paint, upgraded lighting. Infrastructure needs to be addressed, which would include heating, ventilation, air conditioning, would include things such as roofs, windows, building envelopes. And finally, we know that playgrounds need to be upgraded at many of our elementary classrooms, including the subsurface, which would include things such as poured rubber surfacing for safety reasons and durability reasons. So as we think about the individual buildings, we're going to go through the schematics for the buildings that will be addressed. You'll see some common colors as we go through the next several slides. You'll see kind of a pale yellow color, which denotes light renovation. You're going to see kind of a mint green color that denotes heavier modification and renovation. And if you see blue, that indicates that there will be an exterior and interior addition to the building, which we'll discuss as we go through each of the individual schools. So when you look at Terra Heights, for example, which is one of our older buildings, you see lots of yellow throughout most of the building. That indicates that light renovation, flooring, lighting, things that will create more of a positive aesthetic feel. Any place where you see the green, that means we're probably knocking down walls and we're making those older, smaller classrooms larger. The blue at the bottom of your screen indicates a newly constructed area. Very important point. We are not adding to the number of classrooms and we're not pushing up the classroom size in terms of the number of students in the classroom, but we are increasing the footprint and the square footage in these individual classrooms. Trumble Park would be the next building, another building that's over 50, 60 years old. You see lots of yellow here, which represents that light renovation. Green in the core of the building, which will be expanded classrooms in terms of the size. And then towards the upper left-hand part of the screen, you'll see a new addition to accommodate, again, not new classroom spaces, but space so that we can make those smaller classrooms larger. Parkview Heights is the third school we wanted to share with you in this series of slides. Again, yellow indicates light renovation, green represents heavier renovation, blue indicates new addition. Also, Parkview is one of the 3 buildings that we have across the district that has a Head Start program. You can see that on the bird's eye view, the white rectangle towards the upper right-hand corner of the screen with the X in it. The Head Start program will be relocated to the interior of the building. We think that that's a positive addition for our early childhood students, as well as Parkview Heights in general. Other elementary buildings that will be impacted include Bell, Hickory, Patriot, Portal, and Walnut. Most of these buildings date from either the early 1980s in the case of Hickory, all the way up to the early 2000s in the case of Bell. These buildings are a little bit newer than some of the buildings we just talked about, but they still have some significant needs, particularly when it comes to student safety. For example, these 5 buildings do not have a controlled access entryway. And what that means is that all of our buildings have a buzzer and camera system to get in the front vestibule. With these 5 buildings, however, they are not routed through the main office in the vestibule. They can physically go straight into the instructional area, the hallway that serves the instructional area. The new design standard has visitors coming in through the front door being routed through the main office, and once their identity has been checked and secured, then they're allowed into the main hallway and the main instructional area. Again, the point is, 1, to verify our visitors, but 2, to slow down people that come into our building with bad intentions. We also want to do finishing kitchens on 4 of these buildings. Bell already is complete. The finishing kitchen allows us to cut down on paper waste, and it allows us to offer our students a 3rd entree, which is very popular with our students. And finally, we want to make sure that we do some interior updates to these 5 buildings. Again, the lighting, flooring, ceiling tiles, things that will increase the aesthetic value of some of our older buildings. Hickory, built in the 1980s, Hickory will get a significant facelift. You can see the same color pattern applies here. The yellow indicates light renovation. The green indicates more significant renovation. The blue indicates the new addition, which will house not only the office suite, but also the finishing kitchen that we referenced in the previous slide. So Walnut Creek is an impacted building, and the next several slides will look very similar since many of our buildings use this same basic architectural design. So what you'll see here is lots of yellow throughout the building, which represents that light renovation that we've talked about. The green in the next several slides, including Walnut Creek, is important for a couple of reasons. One, you're going to see where the old office is will be a dedicated special education space. That represents significant renovation. And then we will have the controlled access entryway, which is the other green area, which is represented right here. So instead of visitors entering this building and having access to the instructional area and going into the old office area, that will be the new special education area, visitors will be routed into the main area, the vestibule, through the office suite, and then they'll be released into the instructional area. So you'll see that's a common design theme that you'll see in the next several slides. And then finally, you'll see an expanded space for kindergarten and the finishing kitchen that we talked about in the previous slides. Portal looks very, very similar. Light renovation throughout. The special education room takes the place of the old office area. Visitors will be routed through the other green area, which is the new office space, through the controlled access entryway. And then you'll see blue renovated areas, additions for the finishing kitchen and for a kindergarten space. Patriot, very similar. The old office area will be renovated for special education. There'll be an area specifically for the controlled access entryway for the office area. And again, we will see a new addition for the finishing kitchen at Patriot. And finally, Bell, very, very similar. Lots of light renovation, some significant renovation to the old office area, which will again become special education. dedicated workspace for the office, which will be immediately adjacent to the front entryway, the controlled access entryway that we talked about. You will not see a new addition at Bell for a finishing kitchen because Bell already has a finishing kitchen. On to the middle school projects. So we will be doing significant work at both La Vista Middle School and Papillon Middle School. Liberty Middle School, our third middle school, is not being addressed in this bond because it is a very new building, and we're also adding that addition to Liberty Middle School to make it a true three-team middle school. So the specific projects at LVMS and PMS, we want to make sure that these older buildings look just as open and new and fresh as when you walk into one of our newer buildings such as Liberty. So at the heart of that renovation is the science room renovation. You're going to see that with the schematic here in just a little bit. But we know that some of those classroom spaces need significant work, upgrades, refreshers. Our kids deserve the very best, particularly when it comes to science instruction. We also want to look at reconfiguring our learning center spaces as well as interior renovations, which we've talked about in previous slides, lighting, carpeting, painting. Infrastructure improvements such as roofs, windows, HVAC. Both La Vista Middle School and Papillon Middle School have very, very old tracks. We've done our best to patch, we've done our best to resurface, but those tracks need to be replaced. You'll see that on the schematic, which we share in just a little bit. La Vista Middle School does not currently have a dedicated counseling center for our students, so we think that this is a very big add for La Vista Middle School. Papillon Middle already has a dedicated counseling center. And then finally, we'll be renovating the gym at Papillon Middle. We aren't doing something similar at La Vista Middle because that has already occurred after some storm damage that occurred several years ago. So, La Vista Middle School, same color coding applies, lots of yellow throughout the building, making sure that this building, which opened in the early 1970s, looks nice and new and clean and refreshed. You'll see green interspersed throughout the core of the building, which represents classroom space, particularly at the core of the building, where you see the science classrooms that we referenced. And finally, the blue indicates the new addition, which is the counseling center, along with the renovations and new track. Papillon Middle School, very similar. Main difference here, you don't have a need to put in a new counseling center at Papillon Middle since they already have one. You are seeing some green in the gymnasium since, again, that gym floor needs to be replaced. La Vista Middle's was replaced approximately 4 years ago, so they're in a really good place. But then you'll also see green, particularly on the second floor for the science classroom renovations. You'll also see some green lower level locker rooms that need to be updated. And finally, on to the high school projects. Both Titan and Monarch received significant upgrades as part of the 2018 bonds, so you're not seeing nearly as much work being done at the two high schools, but there's still a few updates that we're very excited to offer. So both high schools need significant work to their auditoriums. Monarch in particular, their auditorium is older than the one at Titan, so it has some specific needs when it comes to ADA compliance, and their seats haven't been replaced as recently as Titans have, for example. We know that both auditoriums will need stage floor replacements, sound and lighting enhancements, and one of the features we're particularly excited about is adding additional storage space for the fine and performing arts. We heard from parents, we heard from students, we heard from our staff members that the fine and performing arts are such a central part of what we do here, that they need space for props, for equipment, for costumes and design equipment. So we want to make sure that those needs are being addressed. As part of the 2018 bond, we did some innovative things at both high schools. We added a dedicated PE turf space at Papillon La Vista South, and we added a flex space at Papillon La Vista High School. We are now flip-flopping and addressing those two needs with the 2023 bond. So specifically what you'll see on the schematic is a PE turf space for Monarch and a flex classroom space for Titan. And finally, we're very excited for our athletic programs for both girls and boys, softball and baseball, to offer some significant updates to baseball and softball. Starting first with Monarch, you can see the green area in the auditorium, heavy renovation there. Immediately below the auditorium, you'll see an expanded storage space. This storage space was much smaller when we shared this with the community this fall. What we heard from the community and from our staff was we need more space, so we added some significant square footage there for the fine and performing arts. This represents the vestibule. This is the competition gym on the northeast side of the current building. This will be a new vestibule into the competition area, and then this represents the turf PE classroom space for Monarch. Papillon La Vista South is seeing similar upgrades. The auditorium will receive significant attention, storage space for fine and performing arts, flex classroom on the south side of the building. The baseball and softball complexes. South has the softball and baseball complex on campus, but both fields have significant drainage issues and are lacking in some fan and athlete amenities. So not only are we going to address the drainage issues, but we're also going to be looking at batting cages and upgraded bleachering for our spectators. Fricky Field is owned by the City of Papillon. We're very grateful to have that partnership. The City Fields, where our girls softball team competes, is owned by the City of La Vista. We've had talks with both the City of Papillon and the City of La Vista to do upgrades at those facilities. We're still having ongoing conversations with the city councils at both cities, so we don't want to announce specific upgrade yet, but we're really excited about these opportunities for our student athletes, softball and baseball specifically. Our Young Adult Transition Program serves approximately 40 students ages 18 to 21 with significant cognitive disabilities. And we currently lease a storefront on Gold Coast Road that is rapidly approaching obsolescence. We need more space, not only for our students, but the staff that support them. And there's just some needs for our students in this unique program that aren't being met with the current space. So we're currently looking at an area on district-owned property immediately to the west of Liberty Middle School to build a freestanding facility for this very important program. This design schematic shows not only the entryway to the proposed facility, the parking space for our staff and for parents that are supporting our students there, as well as a 10,000 square foot facility. This facility will serve not only those students that are in the program, but again, the ancillary staff that support them. This design is a little bit different than what we shared last fall. We tried to move it away from the neighborhood, and you can see the residential area on the lower left-hand part of the screen. We want to be good neighbors, and very oftentimes neighbors don't want to look out and see a school building or a parking lot right in their backyard, so we're trying to be respectful of our taxpayers that are in the immediate area. We do want to talk a little bit about growth, particularly at the elementary level, since this is one of the themes that was identified by RSP. RSP is a firm based out of Overland Park, Kansas, that helped the district develop both a short-term and a long-term plan for student enrollment growth. And what we know is that the district has grown at a very predictable and steady rate over the last 30 years. You can see that growth rate illustrated by the bars on the graph. The heavy gray represents elementary level, the yellow represents middle growth, the lighter gray represents high school growth. You'll see something very noteworthy though starting in 2020. Our growth actually stopped and our enrollment went down by about 300 students. What we're starting to see is the enrollment is starting to increase again, but at a slower rate as we recover from the effects of the pandemic. This next slide just breaks it down in a little bit different way, but again, what you can see here is middle level, high school growth is largely going to remain static over the next 5 years. We don't anticipate much growth there. However, when you look at the heavy gray at the bottom of the graph, you'll see that our current enrollment of approximately 6,100 students in elementary grades will grow to approximately 6,600 elementary students within the next 4 years. That's why we've included an elementary building in the bond proposal. This map is one you're probably very familiar with. It shows the district boundaries and where the growth is occurring both short-term and long-term. All of you understand where the growth is occurring quite well, I'm sure of that. There's still some growth north of Lincoln Road, north of the creek, in the Monarch attendance area, but the majority of the growth in the school district is occurring to the south and to the west, which is represented by the red, the yellow, and the orange. We also know that due to a boundary agreement we have with Springfield Platteview, that building developers have the option of bringing additional land into the district's tax base, which we see as a positive thing because an expanding tax base is good for everyone. So that's what's below that purple line near the bottom of your graph. These are the current district southern boundaries. This is currently Springfield Platteview, but we know that that's a growth area, particularly as the sewer infrastructure comes online, and we want to make sure that we're ready for that growth if and when developers bring that into our school district. So, given that reality with enrollment growth occurring in the short term and likely in the long term, we want to make sure that we have land purchased for our 18th elementary building. We have 16 elementary buildings currently. We're proposing to build a 17th elementary. We're also proposing to buy land for that next elementary school. We also want to make sure that we're future-proofing the district by purchasing an additional 40 acres for that 4th middle school. That will be the last middle school that we likely need as a school district. And then again, land for future elementary sites. We know that there's concerns from the community about you buy this land and what if the growth stalls, or what if the economy goes backwards and we don't see the student growth that we're anticipating. We're very confident, given the growth rates we're seeing all across Sarpy County, that if the district would need to sell that land back, if the growth would start moving in the opposite direction, we would have every ability to do that. We also know that technology is here to stay, that as we add more students, as we add more staff, as we add more devices, that puts a strain on our internet infrastructure, and we want to make sure that we have a robust system to handle what we have today as well as tomorrow. We also know that many of the safety and security initiatives that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation require internet infrastructure. So safety and security will be tied to having the right system as well. These improvements will impact every single one of our 21 buildings and all of our ancillary programs. Lastly, speaking to our taxpayers and our empty nesters, we're incredibly grateful for your support. Whether you have kids or grandkids in our school district or not, you are part of the Papillon-La Vista Community Schools family, and we want to make sure that we answer your questions about how this is going to impact your bottom line. The most important takeaway is, under the current proposed list of projects, there is no tax rate increase. And I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But we think that that is a tremendous value for our taxpayers. On the estimated costs, you can see the project breakdown. It's just under $130 million, which would represent the single largest bond in the school district's history. Most of the bond, as you can see, is focused on elementary projects in that new elementary building, which seems logical when you think back to our last bond in 2018, and most of the projects, most of the dollars there were focused on the high schools. So we're trying to find that balance between the needs at the secondary as well as the needs at the elementary. So, finally, a word about voting. This is a special election. It is a mail-in election. All ballots are due on May 9th, but there are a few other dates that we want you to be mindful of. Ballots will be mailed from the Election Commission to the individuals in your home who are registered to vote. Those will be dropped on April 17th, meaning they'll probably start showing up in your mailboxes April 18th, 19th, and 20th. So be on the lookout for your mail. And then ballots are due at the election office by 5 p.m. on May 9th. There are at least 2 physical ways to return your ballot. One, you can go directly to the Election Commission, which is now located over by the YMCA on 72nd Street. Most of you are probably familiar with that. But there are still drop boxes that the Election Commission has established in the county. You can look those up on the County Election Commission's website. The second way is simply to fill out your ballot and return it in the mail. It does require a stamp. It must be sealed. We know how important election integrity is for our citizens, and it must be signed. If you have insufficient postage, if it's not properly sealed, or if it isn't signed, that ballot is null and void. So please make sure that you're doing your due diligence before you drop off your ballot or drop it in the mail. If you do drop it in the mail, be mindful it must be at the commission by May 9th at 5 o'clock, meaning if you drop it in the mail on the 8th or 9th, it's probably going to be too late. If in doubt, I would give yourself at least 4 or 5 days to make sure that the U.S. Postal Service has plenty of time to get it to the right location. April 21 is the deadline to register to vote. That would include our seniors in high school, for example, who are 18 years old and are eligible to vote in Nebraska. Whether you support the bond or not, we would strongly encourage all of our citizens to exercise their civic duties and responsibilities. If you're not registered to vote, including our seniors, please do so now. This is a good time to do so. This is a copy of the sample ballot language that you will see This is the only question being asked on the ballot, so it's quite simple for you. We're grateful for Emily Ethington, our election commissioner, for the work that she's done in collaborating with the school district. We've worked with bond counsel to come up with a specific ballot language. As you look at the ballot language, you can see not only the list of projects that we just discussed, but also whether you then support or are against the bond. It is not my place to tell you how to vote, of course, but it is my place to tell you, please do vote. Vote your conscience and do what our civic duty requires of us, and that is to participate in the democratic process. That brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. I want to thank you for taking just a few minutes to go through these slides with us. We are deeply grateful for your support, whether you are a parent, a staff member, an empty nester, a student. You are all part of the PLCS family. We're deeply grateful for all that you do to make this school district and community such a very special place. If you do have additional questions, we'll be having community forums. We'll be presenting to a variety of community groups. And as always, we have a link from the district website where you can access information not only about the bond, but ask questions that you may have.